and today we will speak about making the transition from campus to corporates. So if you're a final year student, I'm sure that the maddest time of the year is the campus placement time. Wherever you go, everybody is talking about interviews, which are the corporates that are coming to campus, will I get shortlisted on day zero, who's been shortlisted so far, etc., etc. What adds to all the stress is your families and your own expectations of what kind of job will you land. So the only cure to this chaos is to prepare really well for all your interviews. Next, we'll go ahead and speak about some tips that you should keep in mind to prepare for interviews. The first one, focus on your basics. Experts say that you should spend about 100 hours perfecting your resume. Spend enough time going through your resume, making sure you've customized it to the corporate's requirement that you're applying to. Now, not just the resume that you'll be handing over, but also how does it feature on the company profile, on the campus website, wherever you know you will get noticed for your profile, you need to make sure that it's perfect. Once you've gone ahead and prepared a final copy of your resume, you need to ensure that you've gotten feedback from your friends, some who are employed and the others could be your peer group from college itself. You need to decide for yourself though, how much of that feedback do you need to go ahead and incorporate in perfecting your resume. The next point that you need to keep in mind is what you want to go ahead and portray of yourself through your LinkedIn and your Facebook profile. You will be surprised to hear that you're not the only one who's looking at the interviewer's LinkedIn profile. Your Facebook and LinkedIn profiles also get scanned before you're shortlisted for an interview. So you must decide if you need to go ahead and clear any content that will go against you. If you've been employed before, ensure that you get written references and recommendations from your ex-employers. They only act to your advantage. Also, if group discussions and written tests are part of your college's standard placement process, ensure that you spend enough time perfecting those skills as well. Next, customize content. Make sure that you go through your pre-placement committee's rules to understand how these rules affect your career choices. Make sure that you go ahead and research on the firm that you're applying for. Look at what is it that works for the organizations, what have been their hiring records. If you have alumni in college who've gone ahead and started working with these firms, especially from the last year, speak with them and understand what the interviewing pattern is. Also, look up the company's website. Any other literature that is available on the company, make sure that you've gone ahead and read it. You need to go ahead and make sure that you look at if there is any pre-placement talk that is scheduled and ensure that you attend it. Understand any questions that you have, any doubts, any clarifications that you need before you appear for the interview. Next is group discussions. Now, group discussions can be very tricky. So hence, it's a great idea to go ahead and surf the internet for some good tips that you can use while you're appearing for various group discussions. What you should do is get a group of some serious fellow students, some of your friends, and practice mock discussions with them. Some things that you should keep in mind while you're appearing for the group discussion. And it's a very thin line between being too aggressive and being too meek. You can't hog all the limelight, and also at the same time, you can't be too meek. You can't be too loud, you can't be too soft. So it's necessary that you do enough practice to find that fine balance for your own self. Secondly, you must share your own views to be able to speak with conviction. And for that, you need awareness. You need to know about the world around you. You need to understand what's happening, current affairs, to be able to go ahead and present your facts well. So read up the news, sign up for the newspaper every day, look at as many periodicals, go up to the company's website, get as much information and as much fodder that you can to back up your viewpoints really well. So practice, and that's what will make you perfect. Next, build the foundation. Since your resume is the one that gets you shortlisted for the interview, we've spoken about it earlier that you need to spend a lot of time perfecting it. You should be ready to go through various questions that you can get possibly asked on each and every line of your resume. You should be able to use your resume to your advantage. You should be ready to speak through your resume for as long as the interviewer pleases. Whether he wants to go ahead and get an answer in 2 minutes or he wants to go through your resume for an hour, you should be ready to go ahead and answer the questions that he or she asks. Next, make sure that you download about 100 typical interview questions. Why should we select you? Tell me more about yourself. Why should we hire you? How can you sell better? Why should you work as a consultant? Etc., etc. So campus questions typically can be bucketed into 6 categories: work experience, education, technical experience, professional experience, personal goals, and behavior. Now, the first 3 categories are fairly simple. So you know what your work experience is, the education that you have, and the technical skills that you have. However, for each of these categories, not just these 3, but for all 6, you should be able to go ahead and be able to answer if the interviewer pleases to question you for 2 hours. The next category, on problem solving, is the one that you need to practice and make sure you've gone through enough case studies, you have application-oriented answers to back up everything that you're saying. So the last 2 categories, that's personal goals and behavior, you need to remember that there are no right and wrong answers. These are typical open-ended questions, and they give the interviewer a good look into your personality. Your replies reflect your emotional stability, your maturity, and your value systems, all 3 of which are key successes to making you a good professional. Next, sell like a professional. The best prepared answers won't get you anywhere if you're not able to go ahead and present them well. You need to do enough research like we've spoken about earlier. Do mock interviews with your friends, with your family, get feedback from them. Make sure that you have enough answers prepared for everything that you have on your resume. The most important step to good communication is to listen. So whenever an interviewer asks you a question, make sure you listen well. Do not interrupt the interviewer. Ask them for any clarifications if you're not sure of what the question is. Speak slowly, pace out your answers. It's a good practice to speak in front of the mirror, or if you have the facility, to even video record your answers. That way, you will know how you appear when you speak in front of somebody else. So when you practice in front of the mirror, or if you're able to video shoot it, you will get very conscious of the kind of fillers that you use. So if there are any particular word or ums and ahs that you tend to use in your speech, make sure that you consciously make an effort to reduce, if not completely eliminate them. Make sure that you do not use any colloquial or insulting words during the interview or any kind of slang that might be cool to use in college, but definitely not when you're doing an interview. Next, control the interview. An ideal interview is when you're able to go ahead and maneuver the interview to your areas of strength and get the interviewer to ask you questions on those areas. Now, the best interviewees who manage to do that are the ones who create a hook and get the interviewer to ask them the questions that they'd like to ask them. So, if you say that I am very good at conflict management, you're creating a hook because the interviewer would then ask you, so give me an instance of when you've managed conflict well. Now you need to make sure that if you're creating these hooks, you have enough examples, data, facts to back up your statements. So you need to do your homework whenever you're fine-tuning your strategy, whenever you're practicing with your friends, family, doing those mock interviews. Make sure that you practice enough of these scenarios. Remember, these days, interviews don't happen on a gut feeling. They're competency-based interviewing techniques that interviewers hold, which basically means that your past performance is the best indicator of your future performance. So they will ask you questions, they will ask you about situations based on what's there in your resume, with what you've spoken about. They'll ask you to give them examples of things that you're speaking about. So do your homework well and make sure that there is enough material for you to speak about. Even if the interviewer wants to go on for 2 hours, you're able to go ahead and speak. Now, there might be an instant when you'd realize that the interview is going off track. Now, this is the time to get it back on track and to get the interviewer to ask you a question that would reflect your area of strength. So you could go ahead and ask them a question and ask, say, for example, is taxation a very important part of this job? Now, once you've asked a question, you must make it a point to listen very carefully to what the answer is and demonstrate examples to highlight your area of strength, which is taxation in this particular example. Next, dress to impress. Make sure that you're well groomed, you're wearing well-fitted clothes for your interview. You don't need to wear the most expensive shirt, but you do need to wear clean clothes to your interview. Make sure that there are no stains or wrinkles. If you can see it, so can everybody else on the panel. When you get into the interview room, make sure that you greet everybody, starting with the lady, if any, on the panel. Then we need to make eye contact with everybody. Even if there is just one person going ahead and asking you all the questions, if there is a panel, you need to make sure that you're speaking and looking at everybody when you're answering their questions. An important part that you need to keep in mind is your posture. Make sure that you sit up straight in the chair, don't slouch, don't do a little dance with your hands, don't dangle your feet or shake your feet while you're talking, don't play around with a pen, an ID, a folder, resume. Best idea is to go ahead and leave it on the table so that they don't disturb you. You do not want any of these things to distract the attention away or take the attention away from what you're saying. You want the focus to be on what you're saying and on you, and nothing else should get in the way of that. Get a better deal. Now, when you're on campus, when you're appearing for an interview, is that a good time to negotiate? Well, you need to play the situation by the ear. There will be a whole lot of people who will be getting interviewed at that time. So during the interview might not be the best time to go ahead and negotiate unless you've been specifically asked that question in terms of what your expectation is. So wait until one, you get asked that question or you're handed over an offer letter. If you're a lateral hire, given what your previous experience and your package was, that's a good ground to go ahead and start your negotiation. However, wait for the panel to ask you that. Do not initiate any of these conversations in your own self, else you come across as very desperate. And lastly, the thing that you need to keep in mind is not to get discouraged. Now, there will be situations where you will not make it through the interview. You should not lose hope, don't lose heart. Easier said than done. However, what's important is that you learn from the interview, analyze the questions, your answers to them, look at what could you have done differently, and make sure that you put in those points that you've noted for yourself, incorporate those in your next interview. So these are some few tips that you should keep in mind while preparing for interviews. Hopefully they've been helpful. So put your best smile on, don't let nervousness get the better of you, prepare well and do well in your interview. Thank you.